Hi there, high school student. If you're watching this, it means you're thinking about getting ready for your SAT. If you're like most students, the very prospect of studying for this test probably fills you with some combination of nervousness, fear, anxiety, or even dread. A lot of these negative emotions come down to two very common beliefs that millions of students share. 1. The SAT is really hard, or 2. I'm not a good tester. The amazing news is that both of these statements are completely false. They're just not true. Here's the actual truth. First, the SAT is actually really easy once you know how to approach it. It's not rocket science. It's just a collection of weird math, grammar, and reading tricks thrown together in a way that you've never seen before. When you use the right approach, practice the right way, and learn to dissect this exam, it becomes a cakewalk. And 2, there's no such thing as a bad tester. If you think you're not good at tests, it just means one thing. You've never studied for tests the right way before. I've spent my entire career teaching the SAT, and I've seen hundreds of so-called bad testers improve their scores by hundreds of points, getting Ivy-level SAT scores after only a few months of working with me. I didn't give them brain transplants, or make them smarter, whatever that means, or teach them a zillion advanced math facts and grammar tricks that no one else in the world has ever discovered. Instead, I just made them realize something. The SAT tests only one thing. How good are you at taking the SAT? It's not about your math skills or your reading skills or your writing skills or about how good you are at testing. None of that is relevant. Instead, the SAT is simply a very peculiar exam. You're probably already familiar with 80% of the material you need to know to demolish this test. But what you're not familiar with is how the SAT uses that material to trick you. The SAT is a test of tricks and purposely deceiving questions. When you don't know those tricks, it seems really hard and intimidating. Once you get used to them and learn how to overcome them, it's really easy to break 2,000, 2,100, 2,200, even 2,300. All you need is the right guidance, the right practice, and the right map to get you from point A to point B. If you want to understand the SAT to the fullest, imagine the SAT as a maze. The first time you try to solve a maze, are you good at it? Are you fast or accurate? Not really. The whole point of the maze is to be confusing, frustrating, and weird. But have you ever heard someone say, I can't learn how to do mazes? Of course not. That sentence doesn't even make sense. Once you've solved a maze a few times, it becomes so easy that it's almost boring. Imagine that you came upon a really crazy maze. Unlike most mazes, this one was built by a giant team of experts to be as weird, confusing, and annoying as possible. That maze is the SAT. Now imagine that someone gave you a compass, a map, and a set of step-by-step instructions for how to beat the maze. Then, over the course of 90 days, they walked you through the maze, step by step, showing you exactly how to avoid the tricks and traps of the maze and to get to the finish line as fast as possible. Would you think the maze was hard anymore? No way. You wouldn't be anxious about going through the maze. You wouldn't have any anxiety or frustration that the maze wasn't beatable because you'd realize the truth. There's a perfect map for every maze, and when you practice following it, it's no longer difficult to complete it. So if the SAT is just this annoying but totally beatable maze, then why do so many students do so poorly on it? And why are so many students terrified of walking it in the first place? A few reasons, actually. One is that some students never even go about getting a map. A lot of students simply try to figure it out on their own. When you can't see the overall vision of the maze, and you don't have any directions on how to solve it, you'll bump into wall after wall after wall. If you want to get an incredible SAT score, you need a set of directions that'll show you the big picture and walk you from start to finish in the right way. Trying to wing it and study on your own is just about the worst thing you can do. Sure, you might get lucky and make it through the maze unscathed, but again, only if you get very lucky. So you know you need a map and a set of directions to solve the maze. A lot of students figure this out, but even when they do, there's a bigger problem. The directions aren't in the right order. Imagine that your directions were written on a big bunch of flashcards. Right before you start using them to get through the maze, you drop them on the floor and they scatter everywhere. When you pick them back up, they're all out of order. So the first thing you read is, take a left, then climb the wall. Except there is no left turn, and no wall to climb. What the heck are you supposed to do then? When it comes to the SAT prep industry, this is the big problem that no one seems to be trying to fix. There are thousands of classes, books, software programs, and teachers out there that tell you what to do, but they don't tell you when to do it or what order makes the most sense. For instance, if you learn a big overall strategy for the SAT after you've learned a specific fact or tactic, you're in huge trouble. Proper learning starts at the general level, then gets more and more specific as you go. Most prep methods out there seem to throw random information at you in random sequences. The problem is that directions are only useful if they come in the right order. When you're operating without the right sequence, you won't get very far. However, when you do know how to order your steps properly, you're golden. I developed my SAT prescription with this in mind, starting from square one and building your SAT skills inward from the most powerful, most broad strategies at the beginning to the most specific, most fine-tuned strategies at the end. So let's say you get your map and you get your directions and they're in the right order. There's still a problem that you need to worry about in a big way. What if the directions aren't in the right language? In other words, what if the directions make no sense to you? What if the entire map is written and labeled in Swahili and the directions are written in a combination of Latin and Russian? Even if you have the directions in hand and they're in the right order, it won't matter. You won't be able to use them. The same thing applies to your SAT prep. Lots of people will try to sell you a set of directions that don't work for you. You learn differently than everyone else in the world. You have a set of pre-existing knowledge that no one else has. You know and understand certain things right now, and you don't know or don't understand certain other things. Certain types of explanations work well on you, and others go right over your head. If an SAT program isn't built with this simple, obvious fact in mind, it'll fail you every time. You need a map written in your language that makes 100% sense to you. The best map will be written for you and by you, with the help of the map maker, to ensure that you understand it to the fullest. My SAT prescription is built on the idea that everyone learns differently, in their own way, and that the only perfect way to explain something to them is to use their own language and their own specific set of pre-existing skills and knowledge. So let's say you find a map, it's in the right order, and it's in your language, but what if you don't have the tools you need to follow the directions in the first place? Imagine turning a corner halfway through the maze when you read the following. Use your grappling hook to climb the stone wall to your left. You look in your bag, and alas, you don't have a grappling hook. What are you supposed to do? It doesn't matter how good the directions are if you literally don't have the tools to follow them. This is where most SAT programs really mess up. They assume you have certain tools when they give you directions. But if you don't already have those tools and can't take the next step, the directions continue, even though you're stuck. That's where you usually fall behind, lose interest, and lose hope. But this isn't your fault. It's the fault of the map maker. For instance, imagine that you don't know what a constant is in algebra. Then you start learning about a new concept, inverse variation. Your teacher or book or software program says, two numbers vary inversely when their product always creates a constant. What? If you don't have the right tool, in this case, knowledge of what a constant is, then the directions above aren't followable. They make no sense to you. They're not helpful, and you can't do anything with them. A really good SAT program sets you up with all the tools you need in advance. It gives you an inventory and a checklist. If you don't have the right things in hand, it makes sure you get them. If you do already have them, you can check them off and move on, rather than carrying two of each tool, just like most SAT programs that spend half their time teaching you stuff you already know. The SAT prescription was designed with this concept in mind. I've laid out every tool imaginable for the SAT, so you'll never see an explanation demanding the use of a tool that you don't already possess. Better yet, you'll never spend time carrying around tools that you already have. In other words, getting lectured on things you already know and understand, and totally wasting your time. My program shows you what you need, how to get it in your hands, and how to use it to the fullest every single time. So, imagine that you have your map and directions, they're in the right language, they're in the right order, and you have all the necessary tools. That all sounds good unless the directions take countless hours to follow. What good is a set of directions if it takes you 10 hours to get you through the maze? Sure, it might get you from point A to point B, but the point isn't just to get there, it's to get there as fast as possible. That's the whole point of solving a maze in the first place. Now, your SAT score is a function of two things, accuracy and speed. It doesn't matter if you can solve every SAT math problem. If it takes you 2 hours to finish a single section, you're still going to get a terrible score. I'm not just interested in finding a way to solve a problem. I want to teach you how to solve the problem as fast as possible. There are lots of ways to answer every single reading, writing, and math problem on the SAT. But there's only one way to solve these problems fast enough to get you through each section before your time runs out. Most programs just aren't based in reality. They have tons of fancy tricks and techniques, but they never test them against the clock. As a result, you end up with a set of directions that only get you halfway through the maze before the time runs out. Not exactly ideal. So, imagine that you have your directions in the right language, in the right order, you have all your tools, and they're designed to get you there in time. There's still a big problem. What if you never practice following the map? What if you never apply the lessons you learn and repeat them so that you actually get good at going through the maze? Practice makes perfect, but most SAT programs are so interested in getting you out the door that they never take the time to properly review everything they cover. As a result, you're shown a lot of different facts, figures, and tricks, but you never go over them. They go in one ear and out the other. Imagine only being allowed to read your map once, being expected to memorize it by heart on the first try, and then getting thrown in the maze without any review, without ever having walked through the maze once before. Think you'd be able to solve it? Heck no. So the SAT prescription was designed with a key learning concept in mind. If you want to solve a maze, you need to constantly review your map and go through the real maze multiple times. My program is centered on brain science and works by tapping into your memory systems, creating permanent memories, not only of the directions, but of the steps you take to follow them. And even if you have all these questions answered, there's still one big one that you need to think about before you step into the maze. Who wrote your directions in the first place? This is a big problem, and a lot of people don't think about it. I've seen Craigslist ads for major SAT firms hiring college undergrads with no SAT tutoring experience to help them write SAT material for a new product or service. Now think about that for a minute. A lot of the maps on the market right now are developed by people who've never taught the SAT before in their lives. Imagine buying a map from some guy who'd barely been to the maze before, never written a map before, and whose only motivation was to finish the map as quickly as possible so that he could get beer money. When you sign up for most classes, courses, and programs, you're essentially trusting your entire journey to a totally unknown entity. You have no idea who's written these things. I've spent my entire career training students to master the SAT. I've tutored over 330 students one-on-one, with an average score improvement of nearly 400 points per student. I've run my own SAT tutoring firm, trained nearly 100 Ivy League graduates to use my methods, and had my test prep method taught internationally to tens of thousands of students around the globe with industry-beating results. I know this maze like no one else, and after years of study and devoted development, I finally created the map that anyone can use to get the SAT maze done with quickly, easily, and with scores that they never even thought were possible. I know you can get an incredible SAT score, because anyone can get an incredible SAT score with the right map. If you're worried about the SAT, don't be. It's just a maze, and once you solve it the right way, no one can stop you from doing it again and again and again. My SAT prescription was built for students like you, students who know they deserve Ivy-level SAT scores, but just don't know how to get them. Let me show you the way. Learn more about my program below, share it with your parents, and get the only program you'll ever need to get better SAT scores than you ever thought possible. The sooner you start prepping for your SAT, the sooner you'll be able to kick it out of the way and start banging on the doors of your dream colleges. So don't waste another second worrying about the SAT or putting it off. Sign up to learn more about the SAT prescription today and see how easy it is to get college admissions officers drooling to let you into their schools.